When Ellie Morgan spotted a wild bobcat sitting inches from her elderly house cat Oliver, she froze in terror, certain she was about to witness a brutal killing. Instead, she watched as the predator gently touched noses with her pet, beginning a relationship that would defy everything scientists thought they knew about wild animals. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on where you're watching from. Let's get started. The small town of Pine Ridge, nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business. A place where the most exciting event might be the annual Cherry Festival or Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning roses blooming early. So when Ellie Morgan started telling people about a wild bobcat that regularly visited her backyard to see her house cat, most folks just smiled politely and changed the subject. At 67, Ellie wasn't known for tall tales. A retired biology teacher with steel-gray hair always pulled back in a practical bun, she'd spent 4 decades educating Pine Ridge's children about the natural world. She lived alone in a modest cabin at the edge of town, where the neatly kept lawns gradually surrendered to the wild embrace of the forest beyond. Her only companion was a fluffy orange tabby named Oliver, adopted from the local shelter 5 years ago. The first time it happened, Ellie nearly dropped her morning coffee. She'd been sitting on her back porch, enjoying the early summer sunrise, when movement at the forest's edge caught her eye. There, partially concealed by the shadows of towering pines, stood a bobcat, unmistakable with its tufted ears, stubby tail, and dappled coat. Ellie froze, her heartbeat quickening as she calculated the distance to her door. But before she could move, Oliver sauntered across the yard, tail held high, and stopped about 10 feet from the wild cat. What happened next defied everything Ellie knew about wild predators. Instead of attacking or fleeing, the bobcat simply sat down, regarding Oliver with what could only be described as curious interest. The two cats observed each other for several minutes before the bobcat turned and melted back into the forest, leaving Ellie questioning what she'd just witnessed. "I told myself it was a one-time thing," Ellie would later explain to Dr. Marcus Chen, the wildlife biologist who eventually documented the extraordinary relationship. But then it happened again the next week, and the week after that. Always around the same time, always the same strange, peaceful interaction. Dr. Chen, a compact man with perpetually wind-blown hair and the weathered complexion of someone who spent more time outdoors than in, had initially been skeptical when Ellie called the university research center where he worked. "We get a lot of calls about unusual wildlife sightings," he admitted, adjusting his glasses as he set up his 4th camera trap around Ellie's property. 99% turn out to be misidentifications or exaggerations. I figured this would be the same. But Ellie Morgan wasn't like most callers. She had meticulously documented each visit in a leather-bound journal: dates, times, behaviors, even crude sketches of the bobcat's distinctive spot patterns. After 3 months of these strange encounters, she'd finally reached out to the experts. "When she showed me her journal, I knew this was something worth investigating," Dr. Chen said. The consistency and detail of her observations suggested something truly unusual was happening. The first photographic evidence came 2 weeks after Dr. Chen installed his cameras. The images showed exactly what Ellie had described: a healthy adult female bobcat sitting calmly at the edge of the forest while Oliver lounged nearby, neither animal showing signs of aggression or fear. Dr. Chen identified the bobcat as a young adult female, approximately 2 to 3 years old based on her size and condition. "I've named her Luna," Ellie told him, pointing to a crescent-shaped marking on the bobcat's right shoulder, "because of that moon-shaped spot there." As the weeks passed, Luna's visits became more frequent and lasted longer. She would emerge from the trees, always alert, but seemingly relaxed, and sit at what Dr. Chen called the boundary zone, the invisible line where Ellie's maintained yard met the wild undergrowth. Oliver would approach, never crossing into Luna's territory, and the two would engage in what appeared to be a feline version of diplomatic relations. "It's unlike anything I've documented in 20 years of field research," Dr. Chen admitted as he reviewed footage with colleagues at the university. "Bobcats are typically solitary and territorial. They don't form social bonds outside of mating season and mother-kitten relationships, and they certainly don't regularly interact with domestic cats without predatory intent." The footage from Dr. Chen's cameras soon revealed an even more remarkable development. Luna began bringing small gifts, a freshly caught mouse, a rabbit, once even a grouse, placing them at the boundary line before retreating a respectful distance. Oliver, to Ellie's horror and fascination, would inspect these offerings but never took them, instead returning to his spot to continue the silent communion with his wild counterpart. "It's like watching some ancient ritual," Ellie marveled one morning as she and Dr. Chen observed the cats from her porch. "They're communicating something, but what?" The mystery deepened when Dr. Chen's team discovered Luna had a den less than a mile from Ellie's property, a surprisingly close proximity to human habitation for a normally shy predator. More surprising still, trail cameras placed near the den captured images of Luna with two small kittens. "That's when things started making sense," Dr. Chen explained. "Luna was a mother, and somehow she'd identified Oliver as a non-threat to her young. More than that, she seemed to be using these interactions to teach her kittens something about navigating a world increasingly dominated by humans." Indeed, as summer gave way to fall, Luna occasionally brought her kittens to the edge of the forest during her visits. They remained hidden in the underbrush, but their watchful eyes gleamed in the camera footage as they observed their mother's strange ritual with the orange house cat. News of the unusual relationship spread beyond Pine Ridge when Dr. Chen published his preliminary findings in a regional wildlife journal. Soon, Ellie's quiet property became something of a pilgrimage site for wildlife enthusiasts and researchers alike. Local officials, concerned about the potential for disruption to both human and bobcat communities, worked with Dr. Chen to establish viewing protocols that would protect all involved. "We want to study this unique behavior," Mayor Thompson stated at a hastily convened town meeting. "But we also need to ensure the safety of our residents and respect the natural behavior of these wild animals." For Ellie, the attention was both welcome and overwhelming. After years of living quietly with only Oliver for company, she found herself hosting graduate students, documentary filmmakers, and curious neighbors. Through it all, she maintained her daily routine: morning coffee on the porch, Oliver by her side, and increasingly regular visits from Luna and her growing kittens. "The most extraordinary thing," Ellie confided to Dr. Chen as they reviewed camera footage one evening, "is that I've begun to understand why Luna chose my yard, my Oliver, for these visits." She pointed to a series of images showing Luna's distinctive crescent marking. "Look familiar?" Dr. Chen leaned closer, then sat back with a startled expression. "It matches the pattern on Oliver's side," he said slowly, comparing the house cat's orange flank with its own crescent-shaped white patch to Luna's marking. "But surely that's coincidence." Ellie shook her head, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "There's more to this story than science has figured out yet," she said softly. "And I think we're just beginning to understand what these animals have known all along." As winter descended on Pine Ridge, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland of snow and ice, Luna's visits continued with surprising regularity. Dr. Chen had expected the harsh weather to disrupt the unusual relationship, perhaps driving the bobcat deeper into the forest in search of scarce prey or forcing her to relocate her den. But if anything, the cold months only strengthened the bond between the wild and domestic cats. "It defies conventional wildlife behavior patterns," Dr. Chen explained to his fascinated graduate students as they huddled in the small observation blind they'd constructed at the edge of Ellie's property. "Bobcats typically expand their hunting territory during winter when food becomes scarce. They don't maintain social connections that might compete for limited resources. Yet Luna not only maintained her visits, but began arriving with increasing frequency, sometimes daily, often bringing freshly caught prey, which she would leave at the boundary line before sitting back to watch Oliver's reaction. The house cat, now accustomed to these offerings, would sniff them politely before returning to his usual spot for their silent communion. "It's like she's providing for him," whispered Mia Lewis, Dr. Chen's most promising doctoral student, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air of the blind. "Like she's adopted him into her family group." Dr. Chen shook his head, though not dismissively. "We have to be careful about anthropomorphizing, but there's definitely something remarkable happening here." The consistency of her gift-bringing behavior suggests intentionality. What the researchers couldn't know, what would only become clear months later through painstaking analysis of genetic samples, was just how right Mia's intuition had been. Meanwhile, Ellie had her own theories. One snowy evening, as she and Dr. Chen reviewed the day's footage over steaming mugs of cocoa, she pulled out a faded photograph album. "I've been trying to remember where I've seen a marking like Luna's before," she said, carefully turning brittle pages protected by plastic sleeves. And then it hit me. She stopped at an image of a much younger Ellie holding a cardboard box containing 5 tiny orange kittens. This was 20 years ago. A stray had her litter under my porch. Dr. Chen leaned closer, scientific curiosity piqued. "Are you suggesting—" "Look at this one." Ellie pointed to the smallest kitten, barely visible among its siblings. "See that marking? It's not identical to Luna's, but it's similar. And look at the pattern around the eyes." Dr. Chen studied the photograph, then looked at the freeze frame of Luna on his laptop. The resemblance was subtle but undeniable, the same distinctive facial patterning, the similar crescent marking. "I kept one kitten from that litter," Ellie continued. "Marmalade. He lived to be 17. The others I found homes for in town, except for the runt. She was too weak, or so I thought. She disappeared from the box one night and I assumed—" Her voice trailed off. "You think the mother took her back?" Dr. Chen asked, connecting the dots. "It sounds crazy, I know. But what if that mother was herself a hybrid? What if she was part Bobcat and took her most wild kitten back to the forest?" Ellie shrugged, embarrassed. "I'm not a biologist. It's just a theory." Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Actually, while extremely rare, Bobcat domestic cat hybrids are not unheard of. They're called bobcats or sometimes domestic bobcats. Most documented cases involve male bobcats and female domestic cats, but the reverse is theoretically possible. He tapped his fingers thoughtfully against his mug. If, and this is a significant if, Luna is descended from a hybrid line with ties to domestic cats from this area, it could explain her unusual behavior. The possibility was tantalizing enough that Dr. Chen arranged for DNA analysis. Getting a sample from Luna proved challenging but not impossible. The bobcat occasionally left fur on the branches she brushed against, and once, remarkably, she remained calm enough for Dr. Chen to collect a saliva sample from one of her food offerings using a long-handled swab. As winter deepened, Luna began bringing her kittens closer to the boundary line. Now nearly 6 months old, they were learning to hunt under their mother's watchful guidance. At first, they remained hidden in the underbrush, only their eyes visible as they observed Luna's interactions with Oliver. But as February gave way to March, they grew bolder. The first direct encounter between Oliver and one of Luna's kittens happened on a bright, cold morning as Ellie watched from her kitchen window. Oliver was performing his usual patrol of the yard's perimeter when the smaller of Luna's 2 offspring, a female with markings startlingly similar to her mother's, emerged from the forest. Luna was nowhere to be seen, an unprecedented development that made Ellie reach for her phone to alert Dr. Chen. The young bobcat approached the boundary line with cautious curiosity, stopping precisely where her mother always sat. Oliver, spotting the newcomer, paused in his patrol. For a tense moment, Ellie feared the delicate balance might be disrupted by this unauthorized meeting. But then Oliver simply sat down in his usual spot, regarding the young wildcat with the same placid interest he showed her mother. "It's being passed down, Doctor." Chen marveled when he reviewed Ellie's footage. "Luna is teaching her kittens about this relationship, this boundary, its cultural transmission of behavior." The DNA results, when they finally arrived in early spring, provided the scientific community with its biggest shock yet. Luna wasn't just any bobcat, she was indeed part domestic cat, most likely the granddaughter or great-granddaughter of a hybrid. More specifically, genetic markers strongly suggested a familial connection to domestic cats from Pine Ridge, potentially even to Ellie's long-ago litter. We can't prove it conclusively without historical samples for comparison, Dr. Chen cautioned in his published paper, which was already generating buzz throughout the wildlife biology community. But the genetic evidence, combined with the observed behaviors and local history, suggests we may be witnessing the results of a multi-generational hybrid lineage that has maintained some social connection to the domestic cat population in this area. The implications were profound. If Luna was indeed descended from Ellie's lost kitten, if a hybrid lineage had been surviving and thriving in the forests around Pine Ridge for 2 decades, it challenged fundamental assumptions about wildlife behavior, adaptation, and the boundaries between domestic and wild animals. As spring returned to the mountains, bringing with it new growth and renewed activity, Luna's visits took on a new dimension. She began bringing her kittens, now nearly grown, regularly to the boundary line, where they would sit with her to observe Oliver. The house cat, now approaching his senior years, accepted these family visits with characteristic composure, sometimes even grooming himself ostentatiously as if performing for his audience. "He's showing them he's not afraid," Mia suggested as she and Dr. Chen watched from the blind, establishing his own status. One particularly memorable morning, Luna did something unprecedented. After leaving her usual offering, a plump rabbit, at the boundary, she took a single step onto Ellie's lawn, then another. Oliver watched, unalarmed, as the bobcat slowly crossed the invisible line that had defined their relationship for over a year. Ellie, observing from her porch, held her breath. Dr. Chen, reviewing the footage later, would describe it as a moment of profound trust across species boundaries. Luna walked directly to Oliver, who remained seated, tail wrapped neatly around his paws. The bobcat lowered her head, and for the briefest moment, touched her nose to the domestic cat's. Then, with the same deliberate pace, she returned to the forest edge where her kittens waited. "I never thought I'd see it," Ellie whispered to herself, tears welling in her eyes. "They're family. They've always been family." The genetic connection, while scientifically fascinating, only confirmed what Ellie had somehow known from the first encounter. Luna wasn't just any bobcat. She was, in some distant but meaningful way, coming home. News of the extraordinary relationship between Luna and Oliver spread far beyond the boundaries of Pine Ridge. What had begun as a local curiosity transformed into an international sensation when National Geographic featured the story in their summer issue, complete with breathtaking photographs of the bobcat and house cat in their silent communion. Dr. Chen found himself fielding calls from colleagues as far away as Japan and Australia, all eager to learn more about this unprecedented example of cross-species social bonding. "We've documented cases of unusual interspecies relationships before," explained Dr. Naomi Tanaka, a renowned animal behaviorist from Tokyo University who flew in specifically to observe Luna and Oliver. "Elephants adopting orphaned antelopes, leopards caring for monkey infants. but those typically involve a caretaking dynamic. What we're seeing here appears to be a form of recognition, a social connection between adult animals that should, by all conventional understanding, view each other as either prey or competition. With Pine Ridge suddenly on the scientific map, the town underwent its own transformation. Mayor Thompson, recognizing both the opportunity and the responsibility this attention brought, established the Pine Ridge Wildlife Observation Committee to manage the growing interest while protecting both the animals and Ellie's privacy. We're honored that our little town has become the site of such an important scientific discovery, the mayor announced at a packed town meeting. But we must ensure that our newfound fame doesn't disrupt the very phenomenon people are coming to see. For Ellie, the attention was both flattering and exhausting. Her quiet retirement had been replaced by a steady stream of researchers, journalists, and wildlife enthusiasts, all hoping to witness the magic of Luna and Oliver's relationship firsthand. Though she welcomed the scientific interest, she found herself increasingly protective of the cat's privacy. "They're not performing seals," she told a disappointed film crew from a major network when they asked if she could predict when Luna would next appear. "They're wild animals. Well, one of them is, engaging in natural behavior. We observe on their terms, not ours." Dr. Chen supported Ellie's stance, implementing strict protocols for all observers. "The integrity of what we're studying depends on minimal human interference," he explained to his expanding research team. "Our presence already constitutes a variable. We need to ensure it's a controlled one." As spring blossomed into summer, Luna's kittens, now adolescents, began establishing territories of their own. The male, whom Ellie had privately named Shadow for his darker coat, was seen less frequently as he ranged farther from his mother's territory. But the female, dubbed Nova by Dr. Chen's team for the star-like pattern on her flank, remained close, often accompanying Luna on her visits to Oliver. It was Nova who provided the research team with their next breakthrough observation. On a warm July evening, as Luna made her customary visit to the boundary line, Nova ventured beyond where even her mother had gone. While Luna and Oliver engaged in their usual silent observation, Nova approached Ellie's back porch, where the elderly woman sat in her rocking chair, pretending to read but actually watching the cats from the corner of her eye. Nova climbed the 3 wooden steps with deliberate care, her wild eyes fixed on Ellie. The research team in the blind collectively held their breath, Dr. Chen's camera whirring softly as it captured each historic moment. Ellie remained perfectly still, her heart hammering in her chest, but her exterior projecting calm. The young bobcat paused at the top of the steps, just 6 feet from where Ellie sat. Then, in a gesture that would later be analyzed by behaviorists around the world, Nova slowly blinked her eyes, a classic feline signal of trust and non-aggression. "She's acknowledging you," Dr. Chen whispered later as they reviewed the footage. "She's including you in this social network they've established." Ellie, who had instinctively returned the slow blink, nodded. "I felt it. It wasn't just curiosity, she was communicating." The incident represented a significant escalation in the bobcat's comfort with human proximity, raising both exciting possibilities and concerns among the research team. If Luna's offspring were developing an even greater tolerance for human presence than their mother, what might this mean for their future as wild predators? "We're witnessing something extraordinary," Dr. Chen acknowledged during a team meeting held in Ellie's living room, which had become the de facto research headquarters. "But we need to be mindful of the potential consequences. Habituation to humans isn't necessarily beneficial for wild bobcats, even those with domestic heritage." The team implemented new protocols, including reduced observation hours and stricter limits on the number of people present during any visit. Ellie, though understanding the necessity, found herself missing the simplicity of those early days when it had just been her, Oliver, and their wild visitor. Late one August afternoon, as thunderclouds gathered over the mountains, Ellie sat alone on her porch, the research team having departed for the day. Oliver dozed in his favorite spot on the porch railing, his orange fur glowing like embers in the strange, storm-filtered light. Movement at the forest edge caught Ellie's eye. Luna had arrived unusually late and alone. Something about the Bobcat's demeanor struck Ellie as different. She moved with less caution, her attention focused intently on Oliver rather than scanning her surroundings as usual. When she reached the boundary line, instead of sitting, she paced, her tail twitching with agitation. Oliver, awakened by some sixth sense, leapt down from the railing and trotted across the yard toward Luna. Ellie reached for her phone to alert Dr. Chen but hesitated, captivated by the intensity of the moment. As Oliver approached, Luna made a soft chirping sound, a vocalization Ellie had never heard from her before. The house cat stopped, then followed as Luna turned and moved several paces toward the forest, looking back expectantly. "Oliver, no," Ellie called softly, but her elderly cat paid no heed. He followed Luna to the edge of the trees where the bobcat paused again, making that same unusual chirp. Torn between respect for this wild communication and concern for her pet, Ellie slowly descended the porch steps. "Oliver, dinner time," she called, using the one summons that usually brought her cat running. But Oliver, entranced by whatever message Luna was conveying, took another step toward the forest. Heart pounding, Ellie advanced across the lawn. Luna watched her approach, neither retreating nor showing aggression. When Ellie was within 15 feet, the bobcat made a different sound, lower, almost urgent, and turned to look deeper into the forest. Following her gaze, Ellie saw what Luna was trying to communicate. There, barely visible among the underbrush, lay Nova, the young female bobcat. Even from a distance, Ellie could see the unnatural angle of her hind leg and the labored rise and fall of her rib cage. "Oh my God," Ellie breathed, immediately reaching for her phone. She dialed Dr. Chen with shaking fingers. "Marcus, it's Ellie. I need you back here immediately. Nova's injured, possibly hit by a car. Luna brought Oliver to show him. I think she's asking for help." Dr. Chen arrived in record time, accompanied by a wildlife veterinarian who had been consulting on the project. What followed was an extraordinary collaboration between humans and wild animal. Luna, while maintaining a cautious distance, did not flee as the humans carefully approached her injured offspring. Oliver stationed himself at the boundary between forest and lawn, as if mediating this unprecedented interaction. "She has a fractured femur and lacerations consistent with vehicular trauma," the veterinarian confirmed after a preliminary examination conducted with minimal restraint. "She needs surgery, but her prognosis is good if we act quickly." The decision to intervene medically represented a turning point for the research project. While wildlife management typically followed a non-interference policy, Nova's unique status as part of this ongoing study and the remarkable circumstances of Luna seemingly seeking help justified intervention. As Nova was carefully loaded into a transport carrier, Luna watched from a nearby tree, her attention unwavering. Before departing for the Wildlife Medical Center, Dr. Chen paused to address Ellie, who stood with Oliver cradled protectively in her arms. "In 20 years of wildlife research, I've never seen anything like this," he said quietly. Luna understood that her daughter needed help beyond what she could provide, and she knew exactly where to find it. Ellie nodded, stroking Oliver's fur as she watched the vehicle carrying Nova disappear down her driveway. "They've been trying to tell us something all along," she replied. "We just had to learn how to listen." Nova's surgery lasted 4 hours, a delicate procedure that required the expertise of both the wildlife veterinarian and an orthopedic specialist flown in from Colorado State University's renowned veterinary program. Throughout the evening, Dr. Chen kept Ellie updated with text messages, each one a mixture of cautious optimism and scientific fascination. Nova is stable, read his final message of the night. Dr. Reyes says the fracture was clean, which made repair more straightforward. But the most remarkable thing is Luna. She's been circling the Wildlife Center perimeter since we arrived. Somehow she tracked us here, over 3 miles from your property. The staff has never seen anything like it. Ellie, reading this message from her armchair with Oliver purring in her lap, felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief for Nova, worry for Luna, and a deepening sense that they were witnessing something that transcended conventional understanding of animal behavior. The Wildlife Medical Center, typically closed to the public, made an unprecedented exception for Ellie the following morning. "We consider you part of Nova's social group now," Dr. Reyes explained with a smile as she led Ellie to a special recovery enclosure where the young bobcat rested on a bed of clean straw. "Besides, we're hoping your presence might help calm Luna, who's still patrolling outside like a worried parent." Nova, drowsy from pain medication but alert, watched Ellie enter with wary interest. Her injured leg was immobilized in a lightweight cast, and monitors tracked her vital signs. Despite these unfamiliar surroundings and the trauma she had experienced, the young bobcat showed remarkable composure. "She's not demonstrating the stress responses we'd typically expect from a wild predator in captivity," Dr. Reyes observed, checking Nova's monitors. "Her cortisol levels are elevated, but nowhere near what we see in most bobcat rehabilitation cases. It's as if she understands we're trying to help." Ellie approached the enclosure slowly, speaking in the same soft tone she used with Oliver. "Hello, beautiful girl. You're going to be just fine." Nova's ears twitched forward at the sound of her voice, and the bobcat stretched her neck to sniff in Ellie's direction. "Extraordinary," murmured Dr. Reyes, making notes on her tablet. "She's showing recognition responses." After Ellie's visit, the medical team developed a recovery plan that balanced Nova's physical needs with the unique social dynamics at play. With careful coordination between the Wildlife Center and Dr. Chen's research team, they arranged for Nova's recovery enclosure to be placed on Ellie's property once the young bobcat was stable enough to be moved. "We're writing a new protocol here," Dr. Reyes told the assembled team, "one that accounts for the hybrid nature of these animals and the social bonds they've formed. Our goal is to support Nova's recovery while maintaining the integrity of her family group." A week after the surgery, a specialized transport arrived at Ellie's property, carrying a custom recovery enclosure, a spacious structure with secure mesh walls that would allow Nova to see and smell her surroundings while remaining protected during her healing process. The enclosure was positioned at the boundary line, half on Ellie's maintained lawn and half extending into the natural undergrowth of the forest edge, a physical representation of the threshold these remarkable animals had been navigating. Oliver watched with dignified interest from the porch as the team set up the enclosure, his tail twitching occasionally when the humans came too close to his territory. Once everything was in place, Nova was carefully transferred to her temporary home, still groggy from the sedatives administered for transport. "Now we wait," Dr. Chen said, setting up remote monitoring equipment that would allow the team to observe without constant human presence. "If Luna is going to return, she'll need time and space." They didn't have to wait long. Less than 2 hours after the humans retreated, leaving only the silent cameras watching, Luna emerged from the forest. Her approach to the recovery enclosure was cautious but purposeful, her attention fixed on her offspring within. When she reached the mesh wall, she pressed her nose against it, inhaling deeply. Nova, awakening from her sedation, responded with a soft vocalization that the microphones barely captured. What followed was an extraordinary vigil. Luna settled beside the enclosure, positioning herself at the forest side wall where she could maintain visual contact with Nova, while remaining partially concealed by natural cover. She left only briefly, presumably to hunt, always returning to resume her watchful presence. Oliver, after observing from a distance for the first day, eventually approached the enclosure himself. He first thoroughly inspected the lawn-side perimeter, then settled in a mirror position to Luna, guardian of the domestic domain, just as she watched over the wild one. "They're co-parenting," Mia whispered, as the research team reviewed the footage. "There's no other way to describe it. They're both caring for Nova in the ways available to them." The recovery period created a unique opportunity for the research team. With Nova temporarily contained in a controlled environment and both Luna and Oliver maintaining regular presence nearby, they could document interactions with unprecedented detail. Dr. Chen expanded the study to include a broader range of observations, vocalizations, scent marking, time budgets, and subtle communication behaviors previously difficult to capture. What emerged was a complex picture of multi-species social bonding that challenged existing paradigms. Luna and Oliver had developed a sophisticated system of shared space and communication. They maintained separate core territories, but had established the boundary line as a mutual social zone. Their interactions showed elements of both wild bobcat behavior and domestic cat social patterns, blended into something entirely unique. Most revealing were their interactions with Nova. Luna would bring fresh prey and leave it near the enclosure, natural bobcat maternal behavior. Oliver, meanwhile, would often groom himself while sitting close to Nova's enclosure, occasionally slow blinking at the young bobcat, classic domestic cat social signaling. Nova responded to both, suggesting she was fluent in both languages of feline behavior. "We're observing something remarkable," Dr. Chen explained during a video conference with colleagues around the world. "These animals have developed a creole of sorts, a blended communication system drawing from both wild and domestic behavioral repertoires. It suggests a level of behavioral plasticity we haven't previously documented in felids." As Nova's recovery progressed, Ellie found herself increasingly incorporated into this unusual social network. The young bobcat now greeted her with the same slow blinks she offered Oliver, and would often move to the side of the enclosure closest to Ellie when she approached. Luna, while still maintaining a cautious distance from humans, had begun to acknowledge Ellie's presence with brief direct eye contact, a significant gesture from a naturally shy predator. "You've been accepted as a peripheral member of their social group," Dr. Chen told Ellie as they shared coffee on her porch one morning, watching Oliver doze near Nova's enclosure while Luna observed from the forest edge. "It's unprecedented in our understanding of wild felid behavior." 3 weeks into Nova's recovery, the wildlife veterinary team returned to remove her cast and assess her progress. The young bobcat's fracture had healed remarkably well, with excellent range of motion returning to the injured leg. After a thorough examination, Dr. Reyes delivered the news everyone had been hoping for. "She's ready for a gradual return to mobility," the veterinarian announced. "We'll modify the enclosure to give her more space each day, and if all goes well, she could be fully released within another 2 weeks." The plan was implemented with the same careful attention that had characterized the entire intervention. One wall of the enclosure was redesigned to create an adjustable opening, initially just large enough for Nova to extend her head through, then gradually expanded to allow her to move freely between confinement and the outside world. The first day the opening was created, everyone watched anxiously to see what would happen. Nova approached cautiously, sniffing the air beyond her enclosure. Luna positioned herself nearby, attentive but not interfering. Oliver sat at his usual spot, grooming himself with apparent indifference that fooled no one. Nova extended her head through the opening, then pulled back. She repeated this several times, growing more confident with each test of her newfound freedom. Finally, with deliberate care, she stepped through completely, standing on the boundary line between forest and lawn for the first time since her injury. Luna approached her daughter with uncharacteristic directness, touching noses briefly before beginning to groom the younger bobcat's face and ears. The cameras captured every moment of this reunion, including Nova's obvious deference to her mother, a normal bobcat social behavior that confirmed their natural relationship remained intact despite the human intervention. What happened next, however, was anything but normal. After greeting her mother, Nova turned and approached Oliver. The elderly house cat remained seated, his posture relaxed but attentive. When Nova reached him, she lowered her head in a gesture remarkably similar to the one Luna had once offered Oliver. The domestic cat responded by briefly touching his nose to hers, then resuming his grooming as if accepting a family member home after a long absence. "It's like witnessing the blending of two worlds," Ellie said softly to Dr. Chen as they observed this extraordinary reunion. Wild and domestic finding a way to coexist. Dr. Chen nodded, his scientific detachment momentarily overcome by the simple beauty of what they were witnessing. "I think that's exactly what we're seeing, Ellie, and it may be showing us a path forward that we never knew existed." As summer transitioned into fall, Nova's recovery progressed remarkably. The young bobcat now moved freely between the safety of her enclosure and the wider world, her injured leg showing barely a hint of the trauma it had endured. Dr. Reyes, during her final evaluation visit, pronounced the rehabilitation a complete success. "Medically speaking, there's no reason to maintain the enclosure," she told Dr. Chen and Ellie as they watched Nova confidently stalking through the underbrush at the forest edge, her movements fluid and balanced. "She's fully capable of resuming normal bobcat activities, including hunting and territorial defense." But removing the recovery enclosure proved more complicated than expected, not for medical or logistical reasons, but because Nova had incorporated it into her routine. Even with the door permanently open, she returned to it regularly, using it as a sheltered resting place between explorations. It had become, in essence, her den. "I don't think we should rush to dismantle it," Dr. Chen suggested, watching Nova curl up inside the familiar space after a morning of roaming. Wild animals often maintain multiple den sites within their territory. If she's chosen this as one of hers, removing it could create unnecessary stress. The enclosure remained, though modified to better blend with the natural environment. The medical monitoring equipment was removed and the structure was partially camouflaged with native vegetation. It stood as a physical symbol of the unique intersection between wild and domestic that had developed on Ellie's property, neither fully natural nor completely artificial, but a thoughtful accommodation of both worlds. With Nova's recovery complete, Dr. Chen's research entered a new phase. The immediate crisis had passed, but the extraordinary social dynamics between the cats continued to evolve in ways that demanded documentation. Academic interest in the study had grown exponentially, with the preliminary findings challenging long-held assumptions about felid behavior and interspecies relationships. The traditional view of wildlife rehabilitation is that success means the animal returns completely to wild behavior, Dr. Chen explained during a presentation at an international conservation conference where the Pine Ridge bobcats were the central case study. But what we're observing suggests that for some populations, particularly those with historical genetic connections to domestic animals, success might look different. It might involve the development of new behavioral strategies that incorporate elements of both wild and domestic life. Not everyone in the scientific community embraced these findings. Critics argued that the Pine Ridge situation was an anomaly, a product of unusual circumstances that offered little insight into natural bobcat behavior. Some went further, suggesting that documenting and potentially encouraging such hybrid interactions could undermine conservation efforts focused on maintaining pure wildness. We're not advocating for the domestication of wildlife. Dr. Chen countered during a particularly heated panel discussion. "We're simply documenting an existing phenomenon that suggests more behavioral and social plasticity in these animals than previously recognized. Understanding this flexibility could actually enhance our conservation approaches, making them more nuanced and adaptive." Back in Pine Ridge, far from the academic debates, life settled into a new rhythm. Nova established a territory that overlapped significantly with her mother's, but with its focal point centered around Ellie's property rather than Luna's more remote den site. Shadow, Nova's brother, occasionally visited but maintained a more typical male bobcat lifestyle, ranging widely and showing less interest in the domestic wild interface his sister and mother frequented. Autumn brought changes to Oliver as well. The elderly house cat, now approaching 15, began showing his age more visibly. His jumps to reach his favorite perches became more tentative, and his naps grew longer. Ellie noticed him limping slightly one cool October morning and immediately scheduled a veterinary appointment. "Arthritis," confirmed Dr. Patterson, the local veterinarian who had been treating Oliver since Ellie adopted him. "Common in cats his age, especially in the changing weather. I'll prescribe some pain management medication, but you should expect him to slow down a bit." Ellie implemented the vet's recommendations, creating easier access routes to Oliver's favorite spots and ensuring his comfort as the days grew shorter and cooler. What she hadn't anticipated was how the bobcats would respond to Oliver's changing condition. Luna, with her keen predator's senses, noticed the difference immediately. During her next visit, she observed Oliver from the boundary line, her head tilted slightly as she watched his more labored movements. Then, in a deviation from their established routine, she approached him directly, meeting him halfway across the yard rather than waiting for him to come to her. Dr. Chen, reviewing the footage later, was stunned by what happened next. "She's responding to his physical limitation," he remarked as they watched Luna deliberately slow her pace to match Oliver's, the two cats walking side by side before settling in a patch of late afternoon sunshine. "She's adapting her behavior to accommodate his condition." Even more remarkable was the shift in Nova's interactions with Oliver. The young bobcat, who had always shown a special interest in the domestic cat, began bringing small prey items, mice and voles, directly to him, placing them gently before him like offerings. Oliver, while not eating these gifts, would acknowledge them with a slow blink before Nova reclaimed them. "It appears to be a form of provisioning behavior," Mia observed as the team analyzed weeks of similar interactions. Typically, adult bobcats only provision their young or occasionally mates during denning. Nova is treating Oliver as a family member who needs additional support. As winter approached, bringing with it the promise of snow and the challenges of cold, the research team prepared for what they anticipated would be reduced bobcat activity around Ellie's property. In typical years, bobcats ranged more widely during winter months following prey availability and maintaining larger territories. "We should expect Luna and Nova to visit less frequently," Dr. Chen warned Ellie during their weekly research update. "Their wild instincts will likely drive them to focus more on hunting and survival as resources become scarcer." But once again, the Pine Ridge bobcats defied expectations. Rather than reducing their visits as the first snows fell, Luna and Nova increased them, sometimes appearing twice daily, once in the early morning and again at dusk. Their behavior suggested they were incorporating Ellie's property into their regular hunting circuit, using it as a consistent waypoint in their winter routine. Most surprising was their response to Oliver's continued physical decline. As the house cat grew more sedentary, spending most of his days on a heated bed Ellie had placed on the covered porch, the bobcats adjusted accordingly. Instead of expecting him to meet them at the boundary line, they began approaching the porch, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly seeking visual contact with their domestic counterpart. "It's as if they're checking on him," Ellie remarked one snowy evening as Luna sat at the base of the porch steps, her gaze fixed on Oliver's sleeping form, making sure he's still there. The first major winter storm arrived in mid-December, blanketing Pine Ridge with 18 inches of snow in a single night. Ellie woke to a transformed landscape, the familiar contours of her property smoothed into gentle white curves. As she made her morning coffee, a movement on the porch caught her eye. There, curled next to Oliver's heated bed but not quite touching it, was Nova. The young bobcat had somehow managed to climb onto the porch during the night and had chosen to sleep within inches of the elderly house cat. Oliver, remarkably, appeared completely undisturbed by this unprecedented proximity, continuing to doze peacefully despite his wild visitor. Ellie stood frozen at her kitchen window, hardly daring to breathe lest she disrupt the extraordinary scene. Slowly, carefully, she reached for her phone and captured several photos before calling Dr. Chen. "Nova's on my porch," she whispered when he answered, "right next to Oliver, sleeping." Dr. Chen arrived within the hour, bringing specialized camera equipment designed to record through the window without disturbing the animals. By then, Nova had awakened but showed no inclination to leave. She groomed herself thoroughly, occasionally glancing at Oliver, who had also awakened and was watching her with his characteristic unruffled composure. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Chen murmured as he captured the interaction. A wild bobcat voluntarily entering a human structure to maintain proximity with a domestic cat. It challenges everything we thought we knew about natural avoidance behaviors. When Ellie finally opened the door to place Oliver's breakfast on the porch, Nova retreated, not in fear, but with the deliberate movement of a wild animal acknowledging human presence. She jumped gracefully from the porch, but only went as far as the yard's edge, where she sat watching as Oliver ate his morning meal. That evening, as another band of snow moved through the area, Ellie left the porch door slightly ajar, a deliberate invitation she hadn't explicitly discussed with the research team. By morning, Nova had once again taken up position near Oliver's bed, this time joined by Luna, who had settled at the far end of the porch, her alert eyes tracking every subtle movement inside the house. "They're creating a new social structure," Dr. Chen realized as he reviewed the accumulated evidence of these changing interactions. One that incorporates elements of wild bobcat social behavior, domestic cat territoriality, and something entirely new, a shared concern for a vulnerable member of their unusual group. For Ellie, watching this extraordinary relationship evolve beyond anything she could have imagined, the scientific implications were secondary to the simple wonder of it. In her backyard, ancient boundaries between wild and tame were being rewritten by animals who seemed to recognize something in each other that transcended conventional categories. Sometimes, she told Dr. Chen, as they watched the three cats sharing space on her porch, each maintaining their distinct identity while acknowledging their unexpected connection, "I think they've been trying to teach us something all along. We just needed to be open to learning it." January brought record cold temperatures to Pine Ridge, with the mercury dipping well below zero for days at a time. Ellie's small cabin, with its wood stove and weathered walls, remained a warm sanctuary against the bitter chill. For Oliver, whose arthritis worsened in the extreme cold despite his medication, venturing outdoors became increasingly rare. He spent his days curled on his heated bed or near the wood stove, his once adventurous spirit now content with watching the snow-covered landscape through frost-edged windows. The bobcats, however, continued their visits with remarkable regularity. Luna and Nova had established a pattern that the research team now documented with a combination of awe and scientific precision. Each morning around dawn, regardless of temperature or snowfall, Luna would appear at the forest edge. She would pause there, scanning the property with the heightened alertness of a wild predator, before approaching the porch with deliberate steps. Nova often followed shortly after, sometimes accompanying her mother, other times arriving independently an hour or two later. What had begun as occasional sleeping arrangements on the porch had evolved into something more structured. The Bobcats rarely entered during daylight hours when Ellie was active inside the cabin, maintaining their natural wariness of human proximity. But at night, particularly during the coldest periods, both Luna and Nova would take turns occupying the sheltered corner of the porch nearest to Oliver's heated bed. They've essentially established a timeshare system, Dr. Chen explained to his fascinated research team as they reviewed overnight footage. They're maintaining separate shifts, minimizing direct overlap while maximizing proximity to Oliver. It's a sophisticated negotiation of space that incorporates elements of natural bobcat territorial behavior, but adapted to this unique social context. Most remarkably, the relationship had developed a distinct caregiving dimension. When Oliver ventured onto the porch on milder days, Nova would often appear within minutes, as if monitoring his movements. She would position herself nearby, occasionally approaching to touch noses with the elderly cat before retreating to a respectful distance. Luna's interactions remained more reserved, but she too showed attentiveness to Oliver's condition, often bringing small prey items that she would leave at the porch steps, offerings that Ellie dutifully removed once the bobcat departed. It's reminiscent of how bobcat mothers provision their growing kittens, Mia noted during a research discussion, but applied to an adult of a different species. The closest analog might be adoption behaviors occasionally observed in other mammals, but even that doesn't quite capture what we're seeing here. The scientific papers emerging from the study were generating intense interest across multiple disciplines. Wildlife biologists, ethologists, conservation geneticists, and even cognitive scientists found compelling aspects to explore in the Pine Ridge phenomenon. What had begun as a local curiosity had evolved into a case study with implications for understanding behavioral plasticity, interspecies sociality, and the evolutionary underpinnings of caregiving behaviors. For Ellie, however, the scientific significance remained secondary to the daily wonder of witnessing this extraordinary relationship. One particularly cold morning in late January, as she sat at her kitchen table sorting through old photographs, she glanced out the window to see Nova sitting patiently on the porch, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The young bobcat's attention was fixed on Oliver, who had managed to make his way to his outdoor bed despite the cold. As Ellie watched, Nova cautiously approached the elderly cat. Oliver acknowledged her with a slow blink, but remained curled in his heated sanctuary. After a moment's hesitation, Nova did something she had never done before. She stepped onto the edge of Oliver's bed, turning in a tight circle before settling with her back pressed against the house cat's side. Ellie held her breath, expecting Oliver to protest this unprecedented intrusion into his personal space. But the orange tabby merely shifted slightly to accommodate his wild visitor, then resumed his dozing. The two cats, one wild, one domestic, shared the heated bed in peaceful coexistence, their breath synchronizing in the winter stillness. Tears welled in Ellie's eyes as she watched this simple yet profound moment of connection. She reached for her phone to capture a photo, knowing Dr. Chen would want to document this significant escalation in physical proximity. As she did so, movement at the forest edge caught her attention. Luna had arrived for her morning visit and had stopped at the tree line, observing the scene on the porch with what Ellie could only interpret as attentive interest. The senior bobcat watched for several minutes, her posture alert but not alarmed, before silently retreating into the forest. It was as if Ellie thought she was checking on the pair and, finding them peacefully coexisting, had decided her presence wasn't needed. Dr. Chen was indeed fascinated by Ellie's photographs and the accompanying footage from the research cameras. "This represents a significant threshold crossing," he explained during their next meeting. Direct physical contact during rest is a high-trust behavior in felids. It suggests Nova has categorized Oliver as family in a meaningful sense. But Luna didn't join them, Ellie pointed out. She watched and left. That's equally interesting, Dr. Chen nodded. It suggests different individual approaches within this social structure. Nova, who was exposed to Oliver during her developmental period and experienced his presence during her recovery, shows greater integration behaviors. Luna maintains a more traditional distance while still participating in the overall social network. As January gave way to February, these integrated rest periods between Nova and Oliver became more frequent, particularly during the coldest days. The research team documented them meticulously, noting duration, positioning, and behavioral cues before and after. What emerged was a pattern suggesting mutual benefit. Oliver's heated bed provided warmth that benefited Nova during extreme cold, while Nova's presence seemed to coincide with periods when Oliver showed greater mobility and engagement despite his arthritis. There may be a physiological component to this relationship that we haven't fully appreciated, Dr. Reyes suggested during a video consultation. Studies have shown that social grooming and physical proximity in mammals can trigger oxytocin release and reduce stress hormones. If Oliver is experiencing pain relief or improved mobility from these interactions, it could explain his acceptance of what would typically be threatening proximity from a predator. This physiological hypothesis gained support when Dr. Patterson, during Oliver's regular checkup, noted improvement in the cat's mobility despite the progressing winter. His muscle tone is better than I would expect given his age and condition, the veterinarian observed. Whatever's happening with his wild friends, it seems to be benefiting his overall health. February brought a new development that further demonstrated the extraordinary nature of this interspecies relationship. During a particularly severe blizzard, with wind chills plummeting to dangerous levels, Ellie awoke in the night to unusual sounds from her living room. Cautiously investigating, she discovered that the porch door, which she habitually left slightly ajar for the bobcats, had been pushed wider open. There, curled together on the rug before the dying embers in the wood stove, were Oliver, Nova, and, most surprisingly, Luna. The senior bobcat, who had maintained the greatest distance in this unusual social arrangement, had apparently made the unprecedented decision to enter a human dwelling. All three cats were deep in sleep, their bodies forming a triangle of fur with Oliver at the center, bracketed by his wild companions. Ellie stood motionless in the doorway, hardly daring to breathe. The scene before her defied everything conventional wisdom taught about the boundaries between wild and domestic animals. Here was a senior bobcat, a predator who should, by all natural instinct, avoid human structures, who had not only entered her home, but had done so to maintain proximity with a domestic cat during extreme weather. Moving with deliberate slowness, Ellie retreated to her bedroom to retrieve her phone. She captured several photographs of the extraordinary tableau before quietly adding wood to the stove, careful not to disturb the sleeping cats. Then, despite the late hour, she texted the images to Dr. Chen with a simple message. "They're all inside, by the fire." His response came immediately, suggesting he too was awake despite the hour. "Stay back. Document everything. This is unprecedented." By morning, Luna had departed, slipping out as silently as she had entered. Nova remained longer, sharing Oliver's breakfast under Ellie's amazed observation before finally retreating to the porch and eventually back to the forest. Oliver, for his part, seemed entirely unperturbed by the night's unusual sleeping arrangements, grooming himself contentedly in his favorite sunny spot as if wild bobcats regularly joined him for overnight stays. The blizzard incident became a pivotal moment in Dr. Chen's ongoing research. It represented a level of behavioral adaptation that challenged fundamental assumptions about the rigidity of wild animal behavior patterns. Luna, a mature wild bobcat with no history of habituation to humans prior to the study, had made a decision that balanced natural survival instincts against a new set of social priorities, priorities that somehow included maintaining proximity to an elderly domestic cat during extreme conditions. "We're witnessing behavioral innovation in real time," Dr. Chen explained during an emergency research team meeting called to discuss the development. Luna faced environmental pressure, extreme cold, and instead of relying solely on traditional bobcat strategies like sheltering in a natural den, she innovated by utilizing a human structure to maintain social connection while addressing the survival challenge. For Ellie, the scientific implications remained interesting but secondary. What moved her most deeply was the simple reality that her home had become a safe haven, not just for Oliver, her beloved companion, but for these wild creatures who had somehow recognized something in her domestic cat that transcended the usual boundaries between their worlds. "They see him," she told Dr. Chen quietly as they reviewed the night's footage. "Not as prey, not as competition, but as family of some kind, and they've included me in that circle at least enough to trust my home as a shared space during crisis." As news of the blizzard incident spread through scientific circles, the Pine Ridge study gained a new level of attention. What had begun as a curiosity was now being discussed as a potential paradigm shift in understanding behavioral plasticity in wild felids. Researchers from institutions around the world requested permission to visit, to witness firsthand what the cameras had documented. "We need to be careful," Dr. Chen cautioned as he and Ellie discussed the growing interest. "This relationship is precious and fragile. Too much human presence could disrupt the trust that's been established." Ellie nodded, gazing out at the snow-covered landscape where Nova was currently visible, hunting mice beneath the crust of snow with typical bobcat precision. "They've given us a gift," she said softly. "The least we can do is protect it." As February gave way to March, bringing the first tentative signs of spring to Pine Ridge, the relationship between Oliver and his wild companions entered yet another unexpected phase. The extreme cold that had driven Luna to seek shelter inside Ellie's cabin gradually eased, but instead of returning to a more distant relationship, the senior bobcat seemed to have crossed an invisible threshold in her comfort with human proximity. While still more reserved than her daughter Nova, Luna now regularly approached the porch during daylight hours, sometimes even when Ellie was visibly present behind the windows. She maintained a watchful distance, her wild instincts clearly intact, but her willingness to remain visible represented a significant shift in behavior. Dr. Chen's team, having expanded their camera coverage to capture these evolving dynamics, documented a clear pattern of increased comfort and reduced flight distance over time. "What we're observing is a process of calculated habituation," Dr. Chen explained during a virtual presentation to the International Society for Wildlife Ethology. "Luna isn't becoming tame or domesticated. She maintains appropriate wariness and wild behaviors. Rather, she's making sophisticated risk calculations, weighing the potential dangers of human proximity against the benefits of maintaining her connection to Oliver, and by extension, Nova." This nuanced understanding of the bobcat's behavior helped address growing concerns from wildlife management agencies, some of which had expressed worry that the Pine Ridge situation might lead to problematic habituation of wild predators to humans. By demonstrating that Luna and Nova maintained appropriate wild behaviors in all contexts, except their specific relationship with Oliver, Dr. Chen's team made a compelling case for the uniqueness of this situation rather than a concerning trend. "These animals aren't generalizing their trust to all humans or all domestic cats," Mia emphasized during a meeting with state wildlife officials. "They've formed a specific social bond with particular individuals under unique circumstances. Outside of this context, they behave as wild bobcats typically would." Evidence supporting this assessment came from an unexpected source. In early March, a hiker on a trail about 2 miles from Ellie's property reported a brief bobcat sighting. The description matched Luna, and trail camera footage later confirmed her identity. The noteworthy aspect wasn't the sighting itself, but Luna's behavior. She had immediately retreated upon detecting human presence, maintaining the typical flight distance expected of a wild bobcat. "She's compartmentalizing," Dr. Chen noted with fascination. With Oliver and by extension Ellie, she's developed a context-specific comfort, but her general response to humans remains appropriately cautious. It's a sophisticated cognitive distinction. For Oliver, now in his 15th year and increasingly limited by his arthritis, the bobcat's continued presence seemed to provide both stimulation and comfort. Dr. Patterson, during a home veterinary visit, remarked on the elderly cat's surprisingly good condition given his age and physical limitations. "He's maintaining muscle tone better than I'd expect," the veterinarian observed as she gently examined Oliver on Ellie's kitchen table. "And his cognitive function is excellent. Geriatric cats often show signs of confusion or disengagement, but Oliver remains alert and responsive." Ellie smiled, stroking her companion's orange fur. "He has a lot to stay engaged for. His social calendar is fuller than mine these days." The veterinarian nodded thoughtfully. "There's significant research on how novel stimulation and social interaction benefit aging brains in humans and animals. Oliver's unusual friendship might be keeping him young in ways we don't fully understand yet." As the snow began to recede, revealing patches of muddy ground and the first green shoots of early spring plants, the research team expected the bobcat's visitation patterns to change. Typically, breeding season for bobcats in this region began in late winter and extended into early spring, a time when territorial behaviors intensified and social patterns shifted in response to reproductive imperatives. "We should anticipate decreased visits from Luna in particular," Dr. Chen warned Ellie during their weekly meeting. "Adult female bobcats typically reduce their range during late pregnancy and early kit rearing, focusing their activities close to their primary den sites." Ellie nodded, trying to prepare herself for the potential disruption to what had become a deeply meaningful daily rhythm. She had grown accustomed to the bobcats' presence, finding joy in their visits and comfort in how they had chosen to include her aging Oliver in their lives. Yet once again, Luna and Nova defied conventional expectations. Rather than reducing their visits as spring approached, they maintained their regular patterns. Luna, if anything, increased her time spent near Ellie's property, often lounging for hours in the growing patches of sunshine that appeared as the days lengthened. Her behavior showed none of the territorial intensity or breeding-related changes the researchers had anticipated. "Either she's not breeding this season," Mia hypothesized as the team reviewed weekly data, "or she's incorporated this location into her core territory to such an extent that she's maintaining presence despite breeding pressures." The mystery resolved itself in early April, on a mild morning when the forest edge was shrouded in delicate mist. Ellie was enjoying her morning coffee on the porch, Oliver dozing nearby, when Luna emerged from the fog with deliberate steps. Behind her, moving with the wobbling uncertainty of new life, came 3 tiny bobcat kittens. Ellie froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. In all the months of extraordinary interactions, this represented something entirely new. A mother bobcat voluntarily presenting her newborn kittens to a human environment. The implications were staggering. Luna paused at the edge of the yard, surveying the area with heightened alertness. Satisfied that no threats were present, she continued forward, her kittens following in a stumbling line. They couldn't have been more than 3 weeks old, their spotted coats still fuzzy, their movements uncoordinated but determined. Oliver, awakened by some sixth sense, raised his head to observe the procession. He made no move to approach, maintaining his position on his heated bed, while Luna guided her kittens to the base of the porch steps. There, she settled into a sphinx-like position, her amber eyes fixed on Ellie with what seemed like purposeful communication. Heart pounding, Ellie carefully set down her coffee cup and reached for her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she sent a one-handed text to Dr. Chen. "Luna brought her kittens, 3 of them. They're on my lawn right now." His response was immediate. "Don't move. Camera's recording. This is extraordinary." For nearly an hour, Luna remained at the base of the steps, allowing her kittens to explore the perimeter of the porch under her watchful supervision. They tumbled in the new grass, pounced on wind-blown leaves, and occasionally peered curiously at Oliver, who watched their antics with dignified interest from his elevated position. Nova arrived midway through this remarkable introduction, emerging from the forest with the confident stride she had developed in the months since her injury. Upon seeing the kittens, she approached cautiously, maintaining a respectful distance until Luna made a soft chirping sound that seemed to grant permission. Only then did Nova move closer, sniffing the kittens with what appeared to be familial interest. "She's introducing her offspring to the extended family group," Dr. Chen whispered when he arrived, keeping well back to avoid disturbing the scene. "This is beyond anything we could have predicted." The implications of Luna's decision to bring her vulnerable kittens to Ellie's property resonated far beyond the immediate wonder of the moment. From an evolutionary perspective, it represented an extraordinary calculation of risk and benefit. Luna had determined that this environment, which included a human dwelling and a domestic cat, was safe enough to introduce her offspring to, perhaps even beneficial for them to know. "She's teaching them about this social resource," Mia suggested during the emergency research meeting called to discuss the development. "Just as bobcat mothers teach hunting skills and territory boundaries, Luna is showing her kittens that this location and these relationships are part of their inheritance." Over the following weeks, Luna's visits took on a new pattern. She would bring her kittens every few days, typically in the early morning hours when human activity in the area was minimal. Each visit lasted longer than the last, with the kittens gradually expanding their exploration zone under their mother's supervision. Most remarkably, Luna began allowing Ellie to observe from increasingly closer positions. What had begun with Ellie watching through windows evolved to her sitting quietly on the porch while the Bobcat family visited, and eventually to Ellie being permitted to sit on the bottom porch step, within 15 feet of where the kittens played. "She's habituating them to your presence specifically," Dr. Chen noted as they reviewed footage of these carefully orchestrated visits. "Not to humans generally, but to you as an individual, an extension of the trust relationship that began with Oliver." Oliver himself seemed to enjoy a special status with the kittens. As they grew more coordinated and confident, they began approaching the elderly cat with playful interest. Oliver, showing patience that surprised even Ellie, tolerated their curious sniffing and occasional playful pounces from his elevated position on the porch. "He's becoming a mentor figure," Mia observed, "an elder who introduces them to the domestic side of their unusual social world." By late April, the research team had documented over 20 visits by Luna with her kittens, each showing progression in the young bobcat's comfort with this unique arrangement. They began recognizing Oliver specifically, greeting him with the same nose-touch behavior that Nova had developed during her recovery. One particularly bold kitten, whom Ellie had mentally dubbed Scout, even attempted to climb onto the porch to reach Oliver, though Luna gently intercepted this overreach with a maternal correction. "What we're witnessing," Dr. Chen explained during a special documentary filming authorized to capture this unprecedented relationship, "is the creation of a multi-generational social structure that transcends the traditional boundaries between wild and domestic. Luna isn't just maintaining an unusual friendship. She's passing it to the next generation, incorporating it into her kitten's understanding of their world." For Ellie, watching this extraordinary family dynamic unfold in her backyard brought daily wonder and a profound sense of privilege. When Scout finally succeeded in reaching the porch one morning in late April, approaching Oliver with characteristic boldness while Luna watched attentively from below, Ellie felt tears spring to her eyes. "I never thought I'd see anything like this," she whispered to Dr. Chen, who had become not just a research colleague, but a friend sharing in the marvel of these experiences. "It's like they're creating their own rules for how the world works." Dr. Chen nodded, his scientific objectivity momentarily overcome by the simple beauty of what they were witnessing. "That's exactly what they're doing, Ellie. And in the process, they might be teaching us something profound about the possibilities that exist when we let go of our rigid categories and boundaries." By early May, as the forests around Pine Ridge erupted into the vibrant green of full spring, Luna's kittens had become regular visitors to Ellie's property. What had begun as cautious, supervised introductions evolved into increasingly confident explorations. Scout, the boldest of the three, now regularly ventured onto the porch to observe Oliver at close range, while his siblings, a female Ellie had named Willow and a slightly smaller male called Rusty, gradually expanded their comfort zones under Luna's watchful supervision. The growing fame of the Pine Ridge Bobcats presented both opportunities and challenges. Dr. Chen's research had attracted significant funding, enabling the expansion of the study to include more sophisticated monitoring equipment and additional research personnel. A dedicated field station had been established at the edge of Ellie's property, a small, unobtrusive structure that housed equipment and provided workspace for the rotating team of graduate students who now assisted with data collection and analysis. The scientific publications emerging from the study were reshaping understanding across multiple disciplines. Wildlife biologists reconsidered their models of behavioral plasticity in predator species. Conservation geneticists explored the implications of hybrid lineages for species adaptation in changing environments. Cognitive scientists found new evidence for sophisticated social cognition in felids. What began as a curious anomaly has become a case study with far-reaching implications, Dr. Chen explained during a TED Talk that brought the Pine Ridge story to a global audience. "These animals are demonstrating that the boundaries we've drawn between wild and domestic may be more permeable and context-dependent than we previously understood." With international attention came inevitable pressure for broader access. Documentary teams, wildlife photographers, and curious tourists began appearing in Pine Ridge, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous Bobcat family and their unusual domestic friend. Mayor Thompson, recognizing both the economic opportunity and potential disruption, convened a special town council meeting to address the situation. "This is our chance to put Pine Ridge on the map," argued Gerald Wilson, owner of the town's only motel. "We could become an ecotourism destination. Think of the revenue." "And think of the disruption to these animals," countered Sarah Lawson, the local veterinarian who had been consulting with Dr. Chen's team. "They haven't formed this relationship with tourists and camera crews. Human interference could destroy everything that makes this situation special." The debate continued for hours, reflecting the complex mix of pride, protectiveness, and practical considerations that the townspeople felt toward their suddenly famous wildlife residents. In the end, a compromise was reached. A limited viewing program would be established with strict protocols to ensure minimal disruption to the bobcats and their unusual social behaviors. "We'll create a designated observation area," Mayor Thompson announced. "Small groups, by reservation only, supervised by trained volunteers from Dr. Chen's team. All proceeds will support the research program and local conservation initiatives." The Pine Ridge Bobcat Observation Program, as it came to be called, represented a novel approach to managed wildlife viewing. Visitors were carefully screened and briefed before being permitted to use the observation blinds set up at a respectful distance from Ellie's property. No more than 6 observers were allowed at any time, and strict silence was enforced. Most importantly, visitation was suspended immediately if Luna showed any signs of discomfort or altered her behavior in response to human presence. To everyone's surprise, Luna seemed largely indifferent to the distant observers. So long as they remained in the designated blinds and followed protocols, she continued her regular visits with her growing kittens. Nova, too, maintained her usual pattern, sometimes appearing alongside Luna's family, other times visiting independently to spend time with Oliver. She's adapted to predictable human presence within clearly defined parameters, Dr. Chen noted with fascination. It suggests a level of environmental assessment and decision-making more sophisticated than we typically attribute to wild predators. For Oliver, now in his 16th year and increasingly frail despite excellent veterinary care, the Bobcat visits seemed to provide vital stimulation. On days when Luna brought her kittens, the elderly cat would rouse himself from his customary naps to sit at attention, watching their activities with bright eyes and occasionally responding to Scout's bold approaches with slow blinks and subtle tail movements that the research team had come to recognize as his unique communication style. "He's teaching them felid social signals," Mia observed as she reviewed footage of Oliver demonstrating a head turn followed by a blink, a classic cat appeasement gesture, which Scout then mimicked with surprising accuracy. There's knowledge transfer happening here, across species boundaries. By mid-June, as Luna's kittens approached 4 months of age, their visits took on a new dimension. Luna began bringing small prey items, mice, voles, and occasionally rabbits, which she would release alive on Ellie's lawn. The kittens, under her guidance, would practice their hunting skills, while Oliver observed from his elevated position on the porch. "It's a hunting school," Dr. Reyes remarked during a consultation visit. "She's using this safe, familiar environment to train her offspring in essential survival skills." What fascinated the research team most was how Luna incorporated Oliver into these teaching sessions. After her kittens successfully captured prey, Luna would often guide them to display their catches to the elderly house cat, presenting them at the base of the porch steps before allowing the kittens to consume their prizes. "It's as if she's seeking approval or acknowledgement from Oliver," Mia suggested during a team analysis session, "almost like presenting achievements to an elder family member." The kittens' growing independence brought new dynamics to the unusual social arrangement. By July, they had begun making occasional visits without Luna, typically in the early evening when the summer air cooled and Oliver often dozed on the porch. These visits were shorter and more playful, with the young bobcats chasing each other across Ellie's lawn before approaching the porch to acknowledge Oliver with their now customary greeting touches. Scout, continuing his role as the most adventurous of the siblings, developed a particular fascination with Oliver's heated bed. On several occasions, when the elderly cat temporarily vacated his favorite spot, the young bobcat would cautiously climb onto the cushioned surface, circling several times before settling in a pose that mimicked Oliver's typical resting position. "He's not just interacting with Oliver," Dr. Chen noted as they reviewed footage of these incidents. "He's explicitly modeling Oliver's behavior. It's a form of social learning we rarely document between different species." Oliver, for his part, seemed to accept these occasional usurpations of his territory with remarkable tolerance. When he would return to find Scout occupying his bed, he would simply sit nearby, grooming himself with dignified patience until the young bobcat eventually yielded the space. "They're negotiating shared resources," Mia observed, "establishing protocols for coexistence that respect both wild and domestic behavioral norms." In late July, as the summer heat intensified, a new development captivated the research team. Nova, who had maintained a consistent presence throughout Luna's kidding and the raising of her offspring, began exhibiting subtle changes in behavior. Her visits became more regular but shorter, and she showed increased interest in the modified recovery enclosure that had remained at the edge of Ellie's property since her rehabilitation. "Something's different," Ellie remarked to Dr. Chen one evening as they watched Nova meticulously inspecting the enclosure, entering and exiting several times before seemingly satisfied. "She's acting like Luna did before she revealed her kittens." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Her body condition is consistent with early pregnancy. If she conceived in late spring, she would be preparing for birth around now." The possibility that Nova might be pregnant added a new dimension to the already extraordinary situation. If true, it would represent the continuation of this unusual social structure into a third generation. Luna's offspring now preparing to produce offspring of their own, all within the context of this remarkable interspecies arrangement. "The implications are profound," Dr. Chen explained during a hastily arranged team meeting. "If Nova chooses to den near Ellie's property and integrate her kittens into this social network, we'll be witnessing the establishment of a multi-generational tradition, a form of cultural transmission that extends beyond individual relationships." For the next week, Nova's visits became increasingly brief and purposeful. She would appear at dawn or dusk, inspect the recovery enclosure and several other potential den sites near the forest edge, then depart with minimal interaction with Oliver or the other bobcats. Luna and her kittens continued their regular visits, seemingly unperturbed by Nova's changing patterns. Then, on a still August morning, Nova failed to appear for the first time in months. Her absence continued for 3 days, during which Luna showed unusual interest in the recovery enclosure, approaching it several times during her visits but never entering. Oliver, too, seemed attuned to Nova's absence, spending more time than usual at the edge of the porch facing the forest, his attention fixed on the tree line as if expecting her arrival. "She's denning," Dr. Chen confirmed after reviewing footage from their more distant forest cameras. "There's a natural hollow beneath a fallen oak about a quarter-mile into the forest. Our thermal imaging picked up her heat signature there, consistent with a female bobcat in late pregnancy or with newborn kittens." For the next 2 weeks, the research team maintained respectful distance from Nova's den site, using only remote monitoring to confirm her continued presence and well-being. Luna's visits with her now half-grown kittens continued as usual, though they occasionally veered toward the forest section where Nova had established her den, as if checking on their absent family member. Then, on a misty September morning, as Ellie prepared her coffee, movement at the forest edge caught her attention. There, emerging from the fog with deliberate steps, came Nova. Behind her, barely visible in the early light, were 4 tiny forms, her new kittens, making their first venture from the den. Unlike Luna's cautious first introduction of her litter, Nova moved with confident purpose directly toward Ellie's porch, where Oliver dozed in his usual spot. It was as if, having witnessed Luna's experience, Nova had already decided that this environment was safe for her offspring. She guided her kittens across the lawn with quiet chirps of encouragement, bringing them directly to the base of the porch steps. Oliver, awakening to their arrival, rose stiffly from his bed and moved to the edge of the porch, looking down at the new generation with what Ellie could only interpret as interested acknowledgement. Nova made a soft, trilling sound, and her kittens looked up at the elderly orange cat with the innocent curiosity of new life encountering the established world. "It's continuing," Ellie whispered, tears welling in her eyes as she reached for her phone to alert Dr. Chen. "They're passing it down generation to generation." As she typed the message, Luna and her half-grown kittens appeared from another section of the forest edge, approaching Nova's family with what seemed like purposeful interest. What followed was an extraordinary meeting of 3 generations. Luna, her daughter Nova, and both of their litters, gathered in Ellie's yard with Oliver observing from his elevated position like a patriarch overseeing his unusual extended family. "We're witnessing the establishment of a true social tradition," Dr. Chen breathed when he arrived to observe the gathering. Something that transcends individual lifespans and relationships. Something that could continue long after any of us are gone. The arrival of autumn brought vibrant color to the forests around Pine Ridge, and new dimensions to the extraordinary relationship between Oliver and his wild extended family. With 2 generations of bobcat kittens now regularly visiting Ellie's property, the research team expanded their focus to document the complex social dynamics emerging between the different age groups. Luna's kittens, now nearly 6 months old, had entered what Dr. Chen called adolescence, a period of increasing independence and exploration. They still accompanied their mother on many visits, but also began making solo appearances, each developing distinct patterns of interaction with Oliver and with Nova's younger litter. Scout, true to his bold nature, had appointed himself as something of a mentor to Nova's kittens. He would often approach the younger bobcats with deliberate movements, demonstrating hunting techniques or territorial behaviors that they would then attempt to mimic. His siblings, Willow and Rusty, showed less interest in the younger generation, typically maintaining distance while focusing on their own developmental priorities. "We're seeing the emergence of a multi-layered social structure," Mia explained during a presentation to visiting researchers. "It has elements of typical bobcat family groups, but with novel behaviors that incorporate Oliver, and by extension, Ellie, and the domestic sphere." Nova's maternal behavior reflected her unique life experience. Unlike Luna, who had initially introduced her kittens to Oliver and Ellie's property with careful supervision, Nova treated the environment as a safe extension of her territory from the start. Her kittens, benefiting from this confidence, showed remarkably little fear of the porch, the yard, or even Ellie's presence at a distance. "They're being raised in a context that already includes these interspecies relationships," Dr. Chen noted. "For them, it's not an adaptation, but simply their normal social world." October brought the first frost, and with it, a new phase in Oliver's life journey. At 16, he had far exceeded the average lifespan for domestic cats, and despite excellent veterinary care, his health began a perceptible decline. His arthritis worsened in the cooling weather, making movement increasingly difficult. His appetite diminished, and he spent most days curled in his heated bed, conserving energy for brief periods of activity. Dr. Patterson, during a home visit to adjust Oliver's medication, gently prepared Ellie for what was coming. "He's had an extraordinary life," the veterinarian said, stroking the elderly cat with professional tenderness. "But we need to be realistic about his age and condition. Every day now is a gift." Ellie nodded, tears welling in her eyes despite her attempt at composure. She had known this moment would come, had tried to prepare herself for it, but the reality of Oliver's decline still struck her heart with unexpected force. "How long?" she asked simply. "It's impossible to say precisely," Dr. Patterson replied. "Weeks, perhaps months if we're fortunate. The important thing is that he's comfortable and surrounded by everything that matters to him." What neither Ellie nor the veterinarian could have anticipated was how the bobcats would respond to Oliver's changing condition. Luna, with her keen predator's senses, noticed the shift immediately. During her next visit, she approached the porch with unusual directness, climbing the steps without her customary caution to observe Oliver at close range. She sat beside his heated bed for nearly an hour, occasionally reaching out a paw to gently touch his side as if confirming his breathing. Nova, too, altered her behavior. She began bringing her kittens directly to the porch rather than allowing them to play in the yard, ensuring they spent time in close proximity to Oliver during each visit. She would settle them near his bed, occasionally grooming them with focused attention while maintaining physical contact with the edge of Oliver's cushion. Most remarkable was Scout's response. The adolescent bobcat, now nearly the size of his mother though lankier in build, took to spending long periods on the porch near Oliver. He would position himself at the elderly cat's side, occasionally grooming Oliver's head and ears with gentle strokes of his rough tongue, a behavior the research team had never before documented between wild and domestic adult felids. "They recognize his condition," Dr. Chen said softly as he and Ellie reviewed footage of Scout's attentive behavior. "They're exhibiting care behaviors typically reserved for vulnerable family members." This interpretation gained support when the Bobcats began bringing food offerings for Oliver. Luna would arrive with freshly caught mice or small birds, placing them directly in front of Oliver's bed rather than at the boundary line. Nova and Scout followed suit, sometimes making special hunting trips specifically to bring back offerings for the elderly cat. Oliver, though too weak to consume these gifts, would acknowledge them with slow blinks that the research team had come to recognize as his form of gratitude. Ellie quietly removed the offerings after the Bobcats departed, her heart both breaking and somehow healing in the witness of this extraordinary compassion. As November arrived with its shorter days and longer nights, Oliver's decline accelerated. He stopped leaving his heated bed entirely, taking water and small amounts of food only when Ellie brought them directly to him. Dr. Patterson visited more frequently, adjusting his pain medication and providing supportive care, while gently reminding Ellie that the time for difficult decisions might be approaching. What happened next transformed an already extraordinary story into something that would be discussed in scientific circles for decades to come. On a cold, clear night in mid-November, with the first dusting of winter snow covering the ground, Ellie awoke to unusual sounds from her porch. Checking the security cameras she could access from her bedroom tablet, she was astonished to see not just Luna and Nova, but all 7 Bobcats, both mothers and all their offspring, gathered on her porch around Oliver's bed. The elderly cat was awake, his eyes bright despite his weakened state. The Bobcats had arranged themselves in a loose circle around him, with Luna and Nova closest to his bed. Scout sat at Oliver's head, occasionally leaning down to groom the orange cat's ears with gentle attention. Ellie watched, transfixed, as this extraordinary vigil continued through the night. The Bobcats maintained their positions for hours, occasionally shifting but never leaving. Around dawn, Luna rose and approached Oliver's bed. She made a soft sound, almost a purr, but deeper, and touched her nose to his. Each Bobcat in turn followed her example, approaching Oliver to touch noses in what could only be described as a ritual of acknowledgement. Dr. Chen, reviewing the footage later, struggled to maintain scientific detachment. "There's no documented precedent for this behavior," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They've formed what appears to be a genuine grieving circle. They recognize that he's dying." 3 days later, on a quiet morning as the sun cast long shadows across the frost-covered yard, Oliver passed peacefully in his sleep, with Ellie stroking his fur and whispering words of love. The Bobcats, as if sensing the moment, appeared at the forest edge within hours, all 7 of them, standing in silent witness as Ellie emerged, cradling Oliver's small body, wrapped in his favorite blanket. "I'm going to bury him under the oak tree," she told Dr. Chen when he arrived, responding to her message. "It's where he loved to watch the birds in summer." The simple burial ceremony that followed defied every conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. As Ellie and Dr. Chen stood by the freshly dug grave, the Bobcats emerged from the forest edge, approaching with deliberate steps to form a semicircle at a respectful distance. They remained motionless as Ellie placed Oliver's blanket-wrapped body in the earth, stayed in silent witness as she covered him with soil, and placed a small stone marker she had prepared. Only when Ellie stepped back, her task complete, did Luna approach the grave. The senior Bobcat sniffed the freshly turned earth, then raised her head to make eye contact with Ellie. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, an acknowledgement that transcended the usual boundaries between human and wild animal. One by one, each Bobcat approached the gravesite, pausing briefly before retreating to the forest edge. Last was Scout, who lingered longest, sitting beside the small mound for several minutes before finally turning to follow his family. "I've been a wildlife biologist for 30 years, Dr. Chen said quietly, as they watched the bobcats disappear into the trees. "I've never seen anything like this, never even heard of anything like this." Ellie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "They loved him," she said simply. "And somehow, they knew how to say goodbye." In the days that followed, Ellie braced herself for the bobcats to stop visiting. With Oliver gone, she reasoned, the central connection that had drawn them to her property had been severed. Dr. Chen's team prepared to transition their research to a new phase, focused on tracking the bobcats' movements as they presumably returned to more typical territorial behaviors. But on the third morning after Oliver's burial, Ellie looked out her kitchen window to see Luna sitting on her porch, in the exact spot where Oliver's bed had been. The senior bobcat remained for nearly an hour before departing, returning the next day at precisely the same time. Within a week, a pattern emerged. The bobcats continued their visits, though with altered timing and purpose. They no longer brought food offerings, but they maintained their connection to the property, to the grave site under the oak tree, and, increasingly, to Ellie herself. The relationship hasn't ended, Dr. Chen realized as they reviewed weeks of post-Oliver data. It's evolving into something new. They're not just continuing to visit the location, they're maintaining the social connection itself. This continuation presented the research team with unprecedented questions. Had the relationship transcended its original catalyst to become something self-sustaining? Were the bobcats preserving a tradition now, passing knowledge between generations that included this unusual connection to a human dwelling and its inhabitant? "We're witnessing something revolutionary," Mia suggested during a team analysis session. "A form of cultural development that bridges wild and domestic spheres, that continues despite the loss of one of its central members." For Ellie, grieving her beloved companion while witnessing this extraordinary continuation of his legacy, the scientific implications remained secondary to the simple comfort of the bobcat's continued presence. Each visit felt like a connection to Oliver, a reminder that what he had helped create would outlive him in ways none of them could have imagined. "He brought them into my life," she told Dr. Chen one evening, as they watched Nova's kittens playing in the yard, now completely comfortable in this environment that bridged wild and domestic worlds. And somehow, they've decided to stay. 5 years passed, transforming Pine Ridge from a quiet town occasionally visited by tourists into a renowned center for wildlife research and conservation education. The story of Oliver and his bobcat family had spread far beyond scientific circles, inspiring books, documentaries, and even a children's animated series that took creative liberties with the tale, but preserved its essential message of unexpected connections across traditional boundaries. Dr. Chen's research had expanded into the Pine Ridge Interspecies Communication Project, a multidisciplinary initiative that brought together biologists, ethologists, conservationists, and local community members. The modest field station at the edge of Ellie's property had grown into a research campus, though one carefully designed to maintain minimal impact on the bobcat's established patterns. Ellie, now in her early 70s but still spry and sharp-eyed, had become an integral part of the research team. Her detailed observations and intuitive understanding of the bobcat's behavior provided insights that complemented the scientific data. She had also, to her own surprise, become something of a public figure. The Bobcat Lady of Pine Ridge, as one National Geographic article had dubbed her. "I never expected any of this," she often told the graduate students who rotated through the research program. "I was just a retired teacher with a cat, but life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it." The Bobcat family had continued to thrive and evolve in ways that consistently challenged conventional wildlife management paradigms. Luna, now an elderly matriarch by Bobcat standards, had gradually reduced her range but maintained regular visits to Ellie's property. She no longer hunted actively, instead relying on her extended family group for support. A social arrangement almost never documented in wild bobcats but now firmly established in this unique population. Nova had produced 2 more litters in the years following Oliver's passing, each integrated into the unusual social structure with increasing efficiency. Scout, now a fully mature male, had defied typical bobcat dispersal patterns by establishing a territory that overlapped significantly with his mother's and sisters. Rather than competing for resources, the related bobcats had developed a cooperative approach to hunting and territory maintenance that maximized their collective success. Most remarkably, the bobcats had continued and expanded their relationship with Ellie, and, by careful extension, select members of the research team. What had begun as an unusual friendship between a house cat and a wild bobcat had evolved into a multi-generational tradition of controlled interaction with a specific human environment and the people associated with it. "We're observing the development of a novel social system," Dr. Chen explained during a keynote address at the International Wildlife Management Conference. "These bobcats have essentially created their own cultural tradition, one that includes controlled, beneficial interaction with humans while maintaining their essential wild nature and behaviors. This balance between wild independence and selective human interaction had produced unexpected conservation benefits." The Pine Ridge bobcats, with their unique behavioral adaptations, had become remarkably successful at navigating the increasingly human-modified landscape of the region. They avoided roads, utilized wildlife corridors, and maintained healthy population dynamics despite encroaching development in surrounding areas. They've essentially developed a blueprint for coexistence. Mia, now Dr. Lewis and co-director of the research project, explained to a documentary team. They've found a middle path that allows them to remain wild predators while adapting to the reality of a human-dominated landscape. On a crisp autumn morning, almost exactly 5 years after Oliver's passing, Ellie sat on her porch with a cup of coffee, watching the mist rise from the forest edge. The oak tree over Oliver's grave had grown noticeably, its branches now extending to create a dappled shade over the small stone marker she still kept clear of fallen leaves and debris. Movement at the forest edge drew her attention, Luna emerging with her characteristic deliberate pace, though now visibly slower with age. The senior bobcat paused at the yard's perimeter, scanning the area with the ingrained caution of a wild predator before continuing toward the porch. Behind her came Nova and 2 of her most recent kittens, now nearly grown. As Ellie watched this familiar procession, she noticed something different about Luna's behavior. Instead of coming directly to the porch, as had become her custom, the elderly bobcat diverted toward Oliver's gravesite. There she settled into a sitting position, her attention fixed on the small stone marker. One by one, the other bobcats joined her, Nova, her grown offspring, even Scout, who emerged from a different section of the forest edge. Together they formed a loose circle around the grave, their behavior reminiscent of that remarkable night 5 years earlier when they had gathered to keep vigil for the dying Oliver. Ellie set down her coffee cup with trembling hands and reached for the communication device that would alert Dr. Chen and his team. Whatever was happening felt significant, worthy of documentation. But before she could send the message, understanding dawned with heartbreaking clarity. Luna was dying. The elderly bobcat's condition, which had been gradually declining for months, had reached a critical threshold. With the deep wisdom of wild creatures, she had recognized her approaching end and had chosen this particular place, this connection point between wild and domestic worlds, for her final hours. Dr. Chen arrived within the hour, accompanied by a small team equipped with specialized cameras designed to document the scene without disturbing it. They maintained a respectful distance as Luna remained at the center of the gathered family group, occasionally grooming her face or shifting position, but clearly conserving her dwindling energy. "She's completing the circle," Dr. Chen said softly as they observed from Ellie's porch. "She began this extraordinary relationship, and now she's ending her life at the grave of the cat who helped create it." Throughout the day, the Bobcat family maintained their vigil. Occasionally, one would leave briefly, returning with small prey that they would place near Luna, though she made no attempt to eat. Scout spent hours sitting directly beside his mother, sometimes grooming her face and ears with the same gentle attention he had once shown to Oliver. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Luna's breathing became visibly labored. The other bobcats drew closer, forming a protective ring around their matriarch. Nova positioned herself at Luna's head, occasionally making soft vocalizations that the research team's microphones barely captured. "They're saying goodbye," Ellie whispered, tears streaming down her face, "just like they did with Oliver." In the fading light, Luna raised her head one final time, her gaze sweeping across her assembled family before settling on Ellie. In that moment of eye contact, Ellie felt a profound connection that transcended the conventional boundaries between human and wild animal, a recognition of shared experience, of mortality and continuity, of endings and beginnings intertwined. With a soft sigh that seemed to ripple through the gathered bobcats, Luna lowered her head and closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed, then stopped. The great matriarch who had defied conventional understanding of wildlife behavior, who had created a bridge between worlds thought separate and distinct, had completed her extraordinary journey. The remaining bobcats maintained their circle around Luna's body as darkness fell. Scout was the first to approach, touching his nose to his mother's face in a gesture of farewell before retreating toward the forest edge. One by one, the others followed suit, each acknowledging their matriarch before withdrawing. Nova was the last to leave, remaining by Luna's side until the moon rose over the forest. Finally, she too rose and approached the porch where Ellie and Dr. Chen sat in respectful silence. The bobcat paused at the bottom of the steps, looking directly at Ellie with an intensity that seemed to communicate across the species barrier. "She's asking permission," Dr. Chen realized, his voice barely audible, "for Luna to remain here." Ellie understood instantly. Rising slowly, mindful of her aging joints, she descended the porch steps and knelt at eye level with Nova. "Yes," she said simply, "she belongs here." The next morning, with appropriate permissions expedited by wildlife officials who had long been involved with the Pine Ridge study, Luna was buried beside Oliver beneath the oak tree. The simple ceremony was attended by the research team and key members of the Pine Ridge community who had supported the project over the years. As Ellie placed a smooth riverstone beside Oliver's marker, the bobcats watched from the forest edge, witnesses to this final integration of their matriarch into the shared space that had defined their unique social world. In the months that followed, Nova stepped fully into her mother's role as leader of the Bobcat family group. The visits to Ellie's property continued with remarkable consistency, though with subtle shifts in patterns and behaviors that reflected the transition in leadership. Scout took on increased responsibilities within the group, particularly in training the younger generation in the complex navigation of territories that included controlled human interaction. "What we're witnessing is the true test of this social system," Dr. Chen explained during a team meeting. "Will it persist beyond the founding members? Will the traditions Luna established continue into future generations?" The answer emerged gradually but unmistakably. The bobcats not only maintained their connection to Ellie's property, but expanded their controlled interaction with the research team in ways that suggested increasing sophistication in their assessment of human intentions and behaviors. They distinguished clearly between approved team members and strangers, between research activities and potential threats, showing a nuanced understanding of human social structures that paralleled their own complex organization. On the one-year anniversary of Luna's passing, Ellie placed fresh flowers on the double grave beneath the oak tree. As she straightened up, she found Nova sitting nearby, watching her with calm attentiveness. Behind the mature female bobcat, arranged in a loose semicircle at the forest edge, was the entire extended family. 3 generations of bobcats whose existence challenged everything scientists thought they knew about the rigid boundaries between wild and domestic worlds. "They remember," Ellie said softly when Dr. Chen joined her. "Not just the individuals, but the relationship itself. They're preserving something that began by chance but has become deliberate tradition." Dr. Chen nodded, watching as Nova approached the graves, briefly touching her nose to each marker before returning to her waiting family. "What Luna and Oliver created together was never just about them," he said. "It was about possibility. The possibility that the categories we impose on the natural world might be more fluid, more adaptable than we ever imagined." As the bobcats melted back into the forest, Ellie remained by the graves, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple morning sighting of a wild predator watching her house cat. What had seemed impossible then had become not just reality but legacy, a continuing story written across generations, across species boundaries, across the artificial divide between wild and tame. "They'll still be coming here long after I'm gone," she said, the realization bringing not sadness but a profound sense of connection to something larger than herself. What Oliver and Luna began will outlive all of us. In the distance, a young bobcat, perhaps Nova's newest offspring, paused at the forest edge, looking back at the human figure standing beneath the oak tree. For a moment, wild and domestic worlds acknowledged each other across the distance, separate but connected by bonds of memory, tradition, and the endless capacity of life to find new pathways of coexistence.